was a group of English Calvinists that fled Europe and headed towards North America to escape religious persecution. This group is known as the Puritans. Keep in mind that around this time there was a revolution in England. Most of the Puritans settled in what is modern New England, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, etc. Understand that Salem was also a small village situated in what is currently known as Massachusetts. The Puritans formed many self-governing villages and towns that were based exclusively on their own interpretation of the Bible. Children were only taught the Bible and access to knowledge and controlled by the pastors and powerful religious leaders. Rules of social comportment were too long and complicated. Deviations were regarded with very high suspicion. Salem itself was a repulsive town with high amounts of petty bickers and feuds between the Putnam and Porter families, most likely the drive for the witch hunt. Cotton Mather, a prominent religious figure, propagated a great number of pamphlets in the years that were leading up to the trials, urging the dangerous effects and evils of witchcraft. Now keep in mind, he wasn't wrong on the dangers of witchcraft, but he not only detailed the effects of witchcraft, but he also detailed who would engage in it. After knowledge became public about the local pastor's daughter's fits, a town meeting was called as more young girls began to copy the behavior of those two girls. At the meeting, the young girls would constantly interrupt the proceedings multiple times, shudder on the floor, and randomly screaming at the top of their lungs. At the beginning, 3 women were arrested: a homeless beggar, a black slave, and a prominent but poor and unpopular woman who was a member of the rival family. All 3 violated the codes of Puritan life, and nobody bothered to defend them in court. The 3 were subjected to intense interrogation for about a week. But the black woman, Tituba, can't really say that name, confessed that she had signed a deal with Satan and was an agent of his bidding. This confession of hers sparked an absolute vortex over the course of both spring and summer. People who even questioned the proceedings were arrested. In order to prove the accusation, a contentious issue was the admissibility of spectral evidence. Keep in mind that spectral evidence refers to testimony of the accuser that the accused came towards them in the form of a specter or a spirit. Spectral evidence was testimony that the accused witch's spirit appeared to the witness in a dream or vision, was admitted as evidence. The witness will testify that so-and-so almost pinched and choked me, and it would be taken as evidence that the accused were responsible for the biting, choking, and pinching, even though that person was elsewhere at the time. Cotton Mather remitted a treatise to the court in Salem that spectral evidence should be admissible, but cautioned that it is never sufficient for a conviction. The court ignored Mather's dispute and began to issue convictions purely based on spectral evidence. As accusations continued to pile up and hangings took place on what is famously known as Gallows Hill, Bridget Bishop was the first person to be hanged as punishment. This caused the judge to resign as he became disillusioned with the proceedings. Rumor has it that he became an alcoholic as a result of his participation in the trials. Over the course of 1692, 19 people were hanged, with a slight majority of them being women. In September, a man who refused to enter a plea after being indicted was crushed to death after being a subject to a punishment during which he had heavy stones placed on his body until he either died or entered a plea. At this time, Cotton Mather's father and president of Harvard, became a strong critic of the proceedings and refused to acknowledge any legitimacy of the spectral evidence. He has a famous quote that goes, "It were better that 10 witches should escape than that one innocent person should be condemned." The governor of Massachusetts Colony after his wife was questioned about witchcraft, issued a stay on any more prosecutions and executions, and formed his own court to try the remaining accusations. All except 3 people were released and not tried by this specific court because their indictments were based purely on spectral evidence. The aftermath of these witch hunts was consternations over the trials. As many convictions were overturned by the end of the decade, many leaders began to criticize the proceedings and their supporters. Abigail Williams was a notorious accuser. She publicly apologized for her behavior a decade later. The underlying psychology that led to the zealous witch hunt in Salem never went away in America. It just went into hiding and acting like something else. Most people recognize Puritan witch hunting as McCarthyism, but before any of you spurg out and say, "But Joseph McCarthy was right." Yes, I'm aware that he was right about communist infiltration. I've talked about that. But what I mean is the psychology of it, and the fact that it's an example of a moral panic, whether correct or not. But as you guys all know, we live in an era of moral panic. Where do we see this? Let us start with the Me Too movement. You had a bunch of actresses who had good relations with a film producer. There's even photos of them introducing a younger and more attractive female celebrity to him, but suddenly they are becoming irrelevant, and now all of a sudden that guy is a rapist who violated them years ago, and they're scared of him. Hell, let's look at something far more recent. Let's look at the Kavanaugh hearing and how much it discredited the Me Too left-wing sexual McCarthyism. We witnessed months ago the damage that resulted when you let any insane mentally ill woman falsely accuse a man of sexual assault. All of the manosphere MRAs, etc., spoke about the damage of that false rape accusations caused, but that was the first time that the American public saw it for themselves. Everybody saw Christine Blasey Ford. Everybody saw Brett Kavanaugh and saw the hearings. They saw a woman who is dangerously mentally insane, someone who cannot keep her story straight, and someone with a horrible memory. I don't remember how I got to the party, how I got home after the party. I don't remember some of the people there. I don't even remember what day that party was, but I am 100% certain that I was assaulted and it was Brett Kavanaugh. Blasey Ford looked like she was under the influence of a coach or of some kind of drug like Xanax. They asked her, "Who was paying for your polygraph test?" She couldn't answer and needed her lawyers to answer for her. The lawyers literally had to start muting her mic in between questions because they were afraid that her small talk would be picked up and she would say something that would incriminate her. Then the Puritan left mocked Kavanaugh and claimed that he is getting angry, therefore he doesn't have the temperament to be in the Supreme Court. I mean, if you're getting character assassinated on a daily basis and people are accusing you of a serious crime and your family is getting death threats, yes, you would be righteously angry. This is the definition of righteous anger. Only gaslighters will say such a thing. They will get you pissed off and make fun of you for getting pissed off. No, they are not mad because you expose them. They are angry at the fact that you are lying about them. The problem is, social justice Puritans do this at a societal level. SJW subverts some aspect of American culture, and people of course get mad at it. So let's take the Ghostbusters movie as an example. That movie was deliberately designed to slap the face of all the fans, in particular, the white male fans. So when people were outraged and reacted to this, their response was to call people racist and sexist, of course. Same thing as calling someone a witch. But also, what are you upset about? It's just a movie. They want people to get angry but then make fun of them for being angry. We also saw this with the Gillette commercial. Now, you can tell that that commercial was just made to make fun of men and to attack men and attack white men as well in that commercial. But then they go, "Oh, why are you getting triggered about a commercial telling you to be a good person?" Even though that commercial literally doesn't say anything about being a better person at all. That's exactly what the Democratic Party and the left is doing. Kavanaugh righteously defended himself, and they accuse him of having a meltdown. Then in court, they had Ford take a lie detector test, and the results said she was telling the truth. A lie detector test will determine if they believe what they are saying. I've met a lot of people in my life who have lied, but they've believed themselves. It's possible that a person who is not right in the head to convince themselves that something bad happened, and then it will come out positive on a polygraph test. Do you know how many serial killers have manipulated the polygraph test? The legal system knows that the polygraph test isn't reliable. They are not a reliable source of truth. Claiming her claim or her polygraph tests are credible is no different than claiming that spectral evidence is credible. This situation radicalized regular Republican voters, Trumpists, and just regular people, even politicians within the GOP, because they know that any of us can beat Kavanaugh. This is the reason why the blue wave never came. This isn't about politics, it's about justice or injustice. The left wants to destroy the presumption of innocence, Blackstone's formulation, destroy the concept of innocent till proven guilty, etc. They want to destroy all of that to own the conservatards, just like the Puritans did during the Salem Witch Trials. If this can happen to Kavanaugh, it can happen to us. Imagine what can happen to young future GOP politicians from Gen Z and the generations below them. I have seen many feminists and SJWs claiming that you should never question the allegation of rape and just assume she's telling the truth. Hell, the Me Too slogan is "Believe Women." This is pure spectral evidence. Spectral evidence is wholly based on the perception of the declarant. Back then, they had their tribunals only on social media and the left-wing blogosphere, etc. But now they are willing to take it to the courts. Dr. Bernstein once said, "Puritans trying to make the world safe for truth, justice, and love, using censorship, punishment, and cruelty, they never realize that they're the primary instigators of the forces of evil that they labor so hard to combat." A Puritan's life, a feminist, revolves around punishing those around them for thoughts they spend their entire lives repressing. For feminists, it is like controlling their antisocial impulses, just like in the Salem Witch Trials. They come across as bullies because they are bullies. Their supreme desire to control the impulses of others are nothing more than extensions of their own desire to control and suppress their own impulses. Falsely accusing people of rape to ruin their lives, shaming people and writing them up on hate lists and looking for people to call them racists and Nazis in an attempt to prevent them from employment, in an attempt to incite violence against them, is no different than the witch hunts that the Puritans carried out during the Salem Witch Trials.